Hey, I'm Corey,
I'm Becky.
and we are doing a Firepit episode on the truth tonight. We have some off screen guests, Austin and Alex. They've been invited to participate if they wish to, but no obligation. So, the truth. This is a big one because there's so many pieces of the truth. Like something can be completely true,
Mm-hmm.
but not be like the complete truth, so it can still leave you with so many questions.
Yeah.
And everyone's perception of something that happened, anything that happened, is their truth of what happened unless they are blatantly outright lying,
Right. Yeah.
and like they know they're lying. Um,
Right.
and the truth can be a very, very powerful tool. Like,
I
we're
think.
looking at what's happening with Mar-a-Lago, and
Yeah.
this is literally global, like globally effective truth that
Mm-hmm.
could be discovered, and it's fact, it's documented.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I get skeptical with things until they're solidified. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And there's so much deceit
right,
in politics and
right, and
in law,
right,
um, that it's hard to have faith that what comes out as truth is truth all the time.
right, and because just
And
because something's documented doesn't make it true for, I mean, universally.
right.
Like, we look at the Bible with all of its different variations,
Hmm.
and it's considered truth, but even which version
Right.
are you looking at? Which pieces are you considering truth?
And honestly, in translate, like if you're gonna try to get at the root truth of it, you need to be in linguistics and
Hmm.
study Aramaic, and
Right.
because
And you can't have an
translations.
agenda because
Right.
a translation is a really convenient place
Hmm.
to, like, oh my god, I don't know the word, but
Manipulate.
to, yeah, manipulate the truth or to push an agenda.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this, or updated into a language where the time period people would understand
Right.
the story or the message.
Right.
But the ultimate truth behind it,
Right.
we're not going to know
Right.
that.
Right. Exactly. Like,
um,
truth, I think also, intention is so closely related to truth that to get to the full truth of something, I sometimes feel like you need the intention as well, like,
absolutely.
and no one knows the intention but the person who set the intention,
Hmm.
who spoke whatever this was, in line or out of line with their intention.
Hmm.
But it's also important to recognize that, like, impact always matters more than intention. Like, you can be the most well-intentioned person,
Hmm.
but then if you have a negative impact, like, you have to own that, and
Yeah,
like,
and that's a very hard thing to do.
right, right, and like, the best apologies are changed behavior,
Yeah, for sure.
but changed behavior is a really difficult thing.
It's a long thing.
Yes, it's a long,
It's long, it's
convoluted
difficult.
process.
It goes through many evolutions.
Right,
I mean, and I'm speaking from a point of view where I spent a good portion of my life lying, or
right,
avoiding the truth, or um, and I think a lot of times the truth is the hard path,
mm-hmm.
and it sometimes is embarrassing to you.
Yes,
It's painful. It can be hurtful to you and other people, and and there's a lot that goes into it. You
Right.
know, and knowing when to use your truth in a way that is not hurtful to other
Right.
people or yourself.
Right.
And and I think a lot of times that decisioning process in deciding or how you're going to deliver the truth or how you're going to position it,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of times is when the hurt
Yes.
comes.
And I think now is a good opportunity to talk about synonyms because they mean the same thing, officially and technically,
Mm-hmm.
but there is nuance
Mm-hmm.
in word choice. And sometimes I think you do have to be very careful with your word choice when
Mm-hmm.
you are sharing your truth because two sentences could mean exactly the same thing synonym wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if every word is different, but it matches every other, like another word in the other sentence, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and have completely different impacts.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes arguably intention,
Yeah.
you know, like,
And even communication style comes in there,
yes,
and
yes,
how you understand and how other people understand things can be completely different.
right, right. Like my communication style, like I need very direct. I do need word choice to be very well considered. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm human. I'm not always the best with my word choice, you know, but I do try, I think, or at least I hope I do.
I think that, I mean, that goes back to intent too.
Yes.
And I think, well, I like to think that most people try.
Yes, I do
And,
too. And
and I think it's, unfortunately, the people that don't try, get heard the most.
yeah, I do think that
And
sometimes.
sometimes,
Uh, well, because I think if you're not intentional with your words, or maybe you are intentional with your words, and your intent is to hurt people,
yeah,
that those words, those hurtful words, carry more power than a lot of other words do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I mean, words can tear you down.
Words absolutely can tear you down. Words have teared me down
Yeah.
so many times. Um, but also lack of words, you know?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I would, I think on any given day, prefer to have maybe even an overly explained
Hmm.
explanation
Yeah.
that's repetitive, but an overly descriptive explanation
Hmm.
than so few words it leaves me more confused,
Yeah.
you know?
I feel like a lack of words and a lack of explaining and communication is a lie.
I do too. It's a lie of omission. And then,
Yeah.
so if we're talking about truth, we have to talk about lie and
Hmm.
what classifies as a lie.
Hmm.
Like, for me, it is intentionally falsifying or censoring, or, you know, I guess censoring is leaving out important information. Like, altering or censoring pertinent information that does help with full comprehension of what you're saying.
Hmm.
I think if you say something once and then you realize something that changes the story, correcting yourself doesn't mean that you've lied in the past.
No.
I think you have to know what you're falsifying and what you're excluding
Hmm.
for it to be a lie.
And I think I like when people do check themselves.
Yes.
Because I think that it, I found this with people in my family that we may disagree on something, but we can have a debate or a discussion about it. But I've also found that when there is misinformation, people admit it, and
Yeah.
that makes me happy that we do that on both sides. You know, it's like, oh, wait
Right.
a minute,
Because
I spoke too soon
right.
on this.
And you don't know what you don't know, you know?
Yeah,
And I will always, always, always appreciate someone coming to me and saying, I am now coming from a more educated place.
yeah,
I have changed my mind on X, Y, or Z, or this has become more clear to me, you know? And like,
right,
I
and
sometimes I think it's important to vocalize that truth, even just like to yourself. Like I'm a big, big fan of letter writing, and I don't always deliver the letters. You know, sometimes I just write them because
I do.
I
Yeah, I
want
do that too.
to
Express yourself.
express myself, and you know, in my mind, because it's a letter. It's like I am telling this person how I feel, and it can help provide me some closure,
Hmm.
especially when communication has gone so awry that there is no opportunity anymore for a conducive conversation.
Right.
Um,
And I think it's a very healthy way to deal with it, because if you keep all those thoughts and feelings and would have been discussions inside of you, it just festers,
exactly, exactly. And
and
I,
it's not healthy.
no, it's not. I sometimes I think run the risk of saying my truth too early before I've given it time
To
to
marinate,
marinate
yeah.
and get to like the actual truth of what I am
Yeah.
feeling and saying. And I think looking internally for what is your truth,
Hmm.
that I think goes so far.
And I think it's a lot of times people, like, we're in a time or society where we want things quick and rapidly, and discovering yourself is a lifelong process,
Right.
and it's gonna change. Like, I mean, you and I have talks, like, I can, I'm like a third different person in my life at
Yeah.
this point. Like, I've gone through
Yeah.
changes, and that's what's going to happen. I can't imagine, like, when I'm 80, how different I'll be,
Right.
but I think long as you do that self-reflection, search for that truth, and constantly
Right.
learn and grow,
Right.
that you're I think you're going to benefit, and the people around you are going to benefit.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really important to recognize that, like, sometimes regression is part of your truth. And that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that you haven't grown. It
Mm-mm.
is an opportunity to look inside yourself and discover the truth of why this regression happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what triggered this? What can I
Mm-hmm.
avoid in the future? What can I do differently? What have I done differently? Like, what did I do differently this time
Yeah.
from other times that this has happened? And especially, I think, the phrase healing is not linear is cliche at this point, but it's cliche because it's true.
Yeah,
Like,
it's you go through cycles, just
right,
like, I mean, history goes through cycle. Time goes through cycles. It, it, if everything was like this, how boring life would be.
right,
The fact that we get to experience things and learn from them and grow is, I mean, I think that's, for me, what keeps me excited about life.
right,
You
me
know,
too.
even though
I love learning,
some
and
of
I
it
hope,
sucks.
yes, I hope I never stop learning, which I know I should not put into the universe because I know that means that I'm just gonna have like just copious amounts of life lessons. But like, and like, I don't know how many more life lessons I can handle, to be honest. And I'm only 27. Um,
Well, let me just tell you, it's a bumpy ride for a human, but
great.
you get through it,
And
and you
yes,
you look back and you're like, wow.
Right.
I
Like,
did that shit.
right, exactly. Like,
You
I
know?
remember a time where this almost killed me.
Yeah.
And I got the F through.
Yeah. And you can look back and be like, wow, I'm much stronger than I gave myself credit
Oh,
for.
yeah.
And it's it's a good it's a good feeling, and it's good to be reminded of it because you
Right.
forget.
Yes. And I think that's a really important piece, too, is having people around you who see and reflect
Hmm.
your truth. And, like, that's not always a good thing. You know, like sometimes
Yeah.
people reflect the worst in each other.
Hmm.
But even those people are, I think, really important for a season and definitely for a reason, um, because they are opportunities for you to examine yourself and be like,
Hmm.
you know, what did I not like about what this person was reflecting?
Right.
How can I grow from this ill-conceived, I'll say, not, yeah, maybe ill-conceived is an appropriate word, growth, you know, like,
Hmm. And I think, like for me too, like I think of my friends that are like my family. For me, it's important too to have them call me on my truth
me too, me too.
because I will like say things and they'll be like, "Is that really true?"
Right,
And I'm like, "Well, no, that's not really
right. And
accurate."
also, like, the flip side of that is calling you on your truth, like, when you're feeling really low about yourself, right? Like,
Hmm.
reminding you who you are, who you've been, like, how much you've overcome.
Hmm.
That's why I'm so grateful for you and, like, you too, Alex. Like, and Austin, I'm sure, but I just don't know you very well yet. Um, I appreciate so much because I am often feeling very low about myself.
Right.
And it's very difficult for me when I do regress. Like, I know it's part of my truth, and I do utilize it as this, like, introspective moment and learning moment, but it's hard for me. It's very, very hard for me. And
Hmm.
so, and like, I feel very much like a failure. So, being reminded of, like, my successes and how beautiful my truth can be and has been,
Hmm.
it does wonders for my mental health.
Yeah.
Like,
It it, it does. I mean, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I have something coming up that's pretty scary for me. And my friends have like been calling me and reminding me. They're like, well, I'll just say it. They're like, just remember, you are a badass motherfucker.
you are, period.
And I'm like, thank you. Because
Right,
it's like getting that reassurance
right,
is what
right. And
helps you,
I think,
and it helps you feel something that it's true about you that you don't see, but other people see it in you.
yes, and I think what you do have coming up, and this can be my last comment because I don't want to dive too deep into it, 'cause it's your business, but I think what you have coming up relies so heavily on the form of truth that we spoke about earlier
Hmm.
and documentation. And
Hmm.
what stories do the documented stories tell? What truths
Right.
do the documented stories tell? And I mean, to me, with what I know
Hmm.
of what's going on, there's a very obvious truth.
Yeah. And it is to me too. And but at the same time, I know I there's no way I can be objective.
Right.
Um, but I don't know what else I want to say about
Well,
that.
I
Honestly.
can hop off of
Okay.
objectivity. So I think objectivity and subjectivity is so important to discuss when we're talking about the truth because it is so much easier to identify fact from fiction from an objective viewpoint.
Hmm.
But we live in a society where there's not really an opportunity for an objective
Yeah.
standpoint anymore because people we talk about social media every time we do one of these, which is ironic because we post it on social media.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's like a necessary evil.
Yes.
At this point.
Like, the whole point of us posting this on social media is to connect with people who have similar lived stories as us, or who really resonate with what we have to say on these various topics, who want to connect because they are like-minded. And that's beautiful. It's also dangerous.
Yeah.
When we also live in a very divisive world.
Yeah.
We talked about Mar-a-Lago earlier, and like, there are so many truths that so many different people with so many different viewpoints are going to come to with this.
Yeah.
And they're going to think it's backed by fact because their sources, confirmation bias, have confirmed what they already believe. Because those are the ones on your social media pages that are targeted for you. You do get targeted ads.
Feeding you.
Yes, exactly. They are feeding you information based on your interests that you have expressed.
It's eerie, honestly.
It is. And like, I think all the time about the documentary on Netflix about social media called The Social Dilemma. We talk about it also every time.
It's one of the most disturbing things
It is
I've
one of
ever
the
seen.
most disturbing things, especially, you're right, that one scene where I don't even remember the guy or which app he created or what have you. Pinterest. They asked him, what are you most afraid of with this invention of yours? And he literally says civil war. Like,
and the way he looks at the camera and pauses, to me, is like it even makes it more disturbing.
He's haunted by this.
Yeah.
And like, historians going with documented fact, and at this point in this conversation, I feel like I have to put fact in air quotes because we've talked so much about how fact can be manipulated. History is written by the side of the victor, etc., and definitely whitewashed, but that's a whole different topic. And where did I got on whitewashing, and now that's where my brain's going. Please get me out of this.
Social media.
I know social media.
Oh, okay.
So, along the topic of the victor writes the truth, that kind of makes it like, how do we determine what's actually the truth?
Yes, thank you. That's where I was going, because there are so many truths that we are not taught. And these truths that are taught are considered fact. You learn them in a textbook, therefore it's fact. But you have to look at who is excluded from the story, or how
look from
everyone,
the loser's perspective.
Exactly, and look at how everyone is presented. Like, the word savages.
Yeah.
Is an example, a very clear example, of the victors writing the story. Because that has a very strong connotation. And unfortunately, that connotation has now been attached to a very specific group of people who were the victims of genocide.
Yeah, the people that came over were the actual savages.
Yes.
They came, they pillaged, they burned, they killed, overtook land. I mean, that was the savage behavior.
Right. And then now, if that land, that property that has always defined wealth, land owning, property owning, etc., then you look at how that goes with like the 1% and how much wealth they have because of how many properties they have and how much everything is connected. Anyways, also another topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, it can relate to truth, though. I mean, you know this. I was in banking for years, and the truth about property and divisions is because it was systemically set up that way.
Right, exactly.
There were banking regulations in place to make it do what it did.
Right.
And
like overdraft fees. Like, clearly this person is already struggling, or they would not have overdrafted their account. Why? I mean, I understand it's how they make money, but like, money is fake. but it's also so true.
Yeah.
You know, like,
In reality, well, I'll tell you about fees in the bank and how they make money and how disgusting
oh boy.
they are. They do not make money off checking accounts and overdraft fees.
What?
No, they do not make money. They lose money on those accounts. Where they make money is investments. They sweep money overnight in an investment account and make money. They make money on loans. Those fees are because they don't want you. They're trying to discourage you from having business with them because they want the upper echelon for customers. That's what those fees are about.
I'm so mad. I'm so mad.
Don't ever think they're making money off those fees, because they're not. They're losing money, and frankly, a lot of times they end up getting sued and have to give those fees back. Those fees are because they want rich people as clients, because that's where they make their money. Before I left, I mean, I can't get in trouble for this, but before I left, one of the big pushes for the bank that I work for was to close all the like brick and mortar type buildings in certain areas so they could target a market that was very affluent, and that's where they put all their centers. So
I'm speechless. What? That's literally so vile. That's evil.
yeah. Make no mistake about it. The banking business is. I equate it to almost like the mafia,
I mean,
and it's pretty intense. And I've been around large banking headquarters. The upper people, and they're, you would think they were the president. They enter underground. They have basically Secret Service type people around them. It's a cutthroat business.
that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really deeply disturbed. I don't even know where to go from here, frankly. I really found out some hard truths tonight.
There in banking, there is no truth given to the public in banking. The only way you know that is to be in there and see it, and it's accepted because it's a money making machine.
Well, I mean,
The only
literally,
truth
yeah.
people know about banks is they're too big to fail.
Yeah.
Well, we say that, but then the Great Depression happened. People thought that in the same, like in the Great Depression too.
Yeah, I think I think what's different now is uh, banks are, for lack of a better term, in bed
With the government, yeah.
with the government, big pharma. It's all, lobbyists. They're all in it together. It's like,
I mean, I knew this.
yeah, banks, checking it, they lose money on those things. What they make money on is they sell stuff overnight. They package up crappy 2008 package up crappy mortgages and sell them off. Yeah, it's not a good business. That's why I left.
I also worked in banking very briefly, but I was a teller and I was not very good at that job, frankly. I'm so unaccustomed to $100 bills. Didn't realize that they usually stick together, so my drawer would often be like short $100 or so. And my lead, like, branch manager pulled me into her office one day. This is the third time she pulled me into her office in like a month, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, "I'm really sorry, I've got two options here."
Neither one of them are good.
She's like, you can either be terminated and not be able to work at this bank in any branch ever again, or by tomorrow you can give me a letter of resignation effective immediately, and maybe you can be hired back, although frankly I don't think this is the job for you. um, so
Is this before they had cash counters?
I was cocky and I wouldn't necessarily use the cash counter if it was like $500 or $600. I was like, okay, that's just counting to 5 or 6. But I should have used the cash counter, I guess.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, because I was a teller before cash counters, but I was a teller before there were computers. So yeah, it was the Wild West, cashing checks. It's like sure.
So, with you working in the banks previously, do you know by any reason why they stopped with like higher bills than 100? Because I was told like back in the time they had bills like above $100 bills.
That would come out of the Federal Reserve. That decision, it wouldn't be like banks per se. It would be the Federal Reserve that would determine what's in circulation. You know how much to make and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, and it's been a long time since I worked in like a retail bank. I was in risk management and fraud strategy. Because if you have a criminal mind, they like it.
So was your job to be like a spam risk person to find out what to do against a spam risk person?
No, I dealt with the risk associated with systems, specifically teller systems or the account systems, and then I also did fraud strategy to catch different scams on the front end. Like I put in the change to stop fraudulent money orders. But there's, you know, like those scams that people say, oh, I'll send you this $5,000 check and you just send me this back. And there's like, I worked on those systems that started catching that stuff. We put changes in so we could catch it.
Gotcha.
I don't know what I was talking about with that.
That's okay. We were talking about, I mean, you mentioned the Federal Reserve and how in bed that is with the government. It is literally the government. It's government and money. And then we're talking about like, you know, things in bed together that shouldn't be in bed together on that level, like church and state, which is a huge issue right now. And like also ties back to truth. Like abortion is a hugely divisive issue right now. And each side, you know, Buttons.
Buttons is trying to speak her truth.
Yes, Buttons is trying to speak her truth. We should not silence her truth. But, you know, each side of this very divisive issue feels very much like their side is the true side.
Yeah, and I think because they're like, this is the truth for me.
Right. And for me, that's a really important phrase. Because, yeah, every person, every side to every story has so many truths. And what they are perceiving, what they are feeling, is their truth.
Yeah.
It's so complicated.
It is. The truth. It's not, there's nothing simple about the truth.
No. The truth is, I think, one of the most complicated systems that exist, and it's one of the ones that I think people rely on the most. Emotionally, for any sort of decision making at any level, you go with, you know, the truths that are presented to you, but each of those truths has its own story, has its own slant, has its own background that is known to no one but the person speaking that truth.
Yeah. Because perception is always going to enter into it. And how it's received is a different truth probably than how it was spoken, and because of perception and interpretation.
Right. And agenda again. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
can interpret something one way and change your interpretation. An example of this, going back to biblical text, the phrase that's so often used to have a religious backing to bash homosexuality is the phrase, man shall not lie with man the way he lies with woman.
Mm-hmm.
In the original text, the word could have been translated, like the original word could have been translated into boy or man. And so it very well could be saying, God shall not lie with boy or child
Mm-hmm.
as he lie with woman
Mm-hmm.
or adult.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's condoning pedophilia. But there's, you know, so much of that in the church. And
I mean, there's bestiality in the Bible.
right,
You know, like,
right.
um, it, there's a lot for me, and to me, there's a lot of contradictions
Yes. And I
in it,
think with
and
the Bible specifically, it's a document that has been translated so many times
mm-hmm.
that essentially at this point it is a patchwork quilt at best.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, something may have made sense
Yeah,
in its original context that really doesn't make sense in the current context, but it's
right,
a truthful translation, it's an accurate
right,
translation of whatever text they're pulling from.
and like, I know you might find this crazy, but sometimes I actually read the Bible,
I'm interested.
and but what I do is I like certain words will stick out to me, not necessarily whatever the story is or what have you. And I like to do like a deep dive on. Okay.
Thank you.
Um,
The cons of taping outside, folks.
I like to do though a deep dive on the word, and there's like a lot of good sites to find out, like, and in the context, the different, the Hebrew word and how it would translate, and the Aramaic word, and there's another one that I always,
Slavic.
there's shoot, I'm not going to remember it now, but there's a specific one that's like really typically gets at like a real root.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Um,
I.
and like the painting that I did, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
it's the Hebrew word nefesh,
Mm-hmm.
which in what I was reading, it said soul,
Mm.
but nefesh, the Hebrew word, means a sentient being.
Mm.
And so it's like different
I really like that. Yeah.
nuances to the actual word and how it was translated, and to me that part of it is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because ultimately to me they're like stories that at some point probably made sense to people,
Right.
um but I think sometimes there's hidden words in there where you can
Yes.
actually learn something, and
I
like,
think so too. I had a version of the Bible once. It was this massive text because it was hugely annotated. It had
oh yeah,
every possible translation
yeah,
of the most commonly translated words, um, or the most commonly mistranslated words.
right,
And sometimes it would have like background as to maybe why, like in this version, it was this like meaning of this
mm-hmm.
word, and here's a hypothetical reason why with like historical backing.
Mm-hmm.
It was honestly a really cool Bible.
Yeah, stuff like that is very interesting to me. One of my, it's like my dad's best friend is a linguistics professor.
Oh, cool.
And often I'll find certain words and I'll send him like the passage. And I'm like, can you give me some insight into this?
Yeah.
You know, from your perspective. And it's very interesting when you look at it like a literary work.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Um,
Unfortunately, that was our timer to
That's
pick
fine.
our topic for next week. Ooh, and it is acceptance. I don't know if y'all can see that, but I think that goes really well actually with truth and what we do accept as truth.
Yeah.
And how maybe accepting various truths can lead to a fuller understanding.
Yeah,
So,
and accepting the truth and being able to move on.
yeah. I think this will be a really interesting conversation.
I think so too.
If we are sticking to our 2-week schedule, that would be on August 27th. So,
Okay.
barring any unforeseen personal circumstances like last week, thank you for being flexible, viewers. We'll tune in again on August 27th. See you then. Bye, friends.
Bye.